Welcome back, listeners. It looks like someone's been busy.
Oh, yeah.
You've sent us a ton of research on religion in Latin America,
Yeah.
lots of academic papers, plus a really fascinating blog post about Cuba.
Cuba, huh? That's a whole other ballgame.
Right. So it seems you're really interested in this whole shift with younger generations and what it means for the future of faith down there.
Definitely a hot topic these days.
So we're going to take a deep dive into all this, pull out the key insights, and hopefully connect the dots for you. Okay, so
Sounds good.
should we just jump right in?
Let's do it.
One of the first things that jumped out at me from all this stuff you sent was how much Catholicism is declining.
Yeah, that's been a major trend.
I mean, the numbers are kind of shocking, like in Chile.
Oh, yeah. Chile's a prime example.
Catholicism went from 66% of the population in 2007 down to 42% just last year. And during the same period, the number of people who said they have no religion shot up from 14% to 37%.
Wow.
Huge changes in a pretty short time.
Yeah, you see that all across Latin America.
Yeah.
And it's not just about people losing faith altogether. It's more about how they relate to the institutions and what it even means to be religious these days. It's a deeper shift.
So it's not as simple as everyone just becoming an atheist.
Not at all. The research paints a much more nuanced picture, especially when you look at how young people are engaging with faith. They're not necessarily abandoning it. They're reshaping it.
Okay, so you're saying they're kind of redefining what religion looks like.
Exactly. And the research highlights a few different ways they're doing this. One term that really stood out to me was this idea of a la carte Catholicism.
A la carte Catholicism.
Yeah, it basically means that young people are still identifying as Catholic, but they're more selective about which teachings and practices resonate with them. They're picking and choosing. They're not afraid to disagree with the church on certain issues. It's like they're creating their own personalized version of Catholicism.
So it's less about blindly following the rules and more about finding what works for them personally.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's not just happening with Catholicism either. We're seeing a rise in what some researchers call believers without belonging.
Believers without belonging. Interesting.
Yeah, these are folks who believe in God or a higher power, but they don't necessarily feel connected to any specific religion. They might consider themselves spiritual, but not religious in the traditional sense.
So are these young people the ones kind of leading the charge in redefining what it means to be spiritual?
I'd say so, yeah. They're questioning the old ways, experimenting, forging their own paths. And that leads us to another group, what we call the seekers.
The seekers, okay.
Yeah, they're really interesting. They're actively seeking out different faiths and spiritual practices, almost creating their own unique blend of beliefs.
Like a spiritual mixtape.
Ah, I like that. Exactly like that. And it's a good question. Is this just happening in Latin America, or is this a global trend?
Are young people all over the world kind of turning away from organized religion and finding their own way?
Could be something to keep in mind as we go deeper.
Okay, that's a good point. It makes you wonder if this is a bigger generational shift, not just about Latin America.
It might be.
So we've got all these changes happening, but it doesn't sound like it's all smooth sailing, right?
No, not always. There are definitely some tensions, especially when traditional religious teachings clash with more modern secular values.
Right, of course. That makes sense. So what's the research saying about how young people are dealing with those tensions?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that religious institutions face is figuring out how to engage young people who value things like autonomy and critical thinking. These aren't the type to just blindly accept things, especially when it comes to issues like gender equality or LGBTQ plus rights.
So they're looking for a faith that aligns with their own values and experiences, even if it means challenging the status quo.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And it's not just limited to liberal or progressive circles either. Even in Brazil, where you have a pretty large and influential evangelical movement, there's a growing push for more acceptance and inclusion, even within those more conservative communities.
Interesting. So even within these traditional structures, there's this internal pressure for change.
Exactly. And a lot of that pressure is coming from young people who are demanding that their faith reflect the realities of their lives and their understanding of the world. And that brings us to a really important concept: lived religion.
Okay, now I'm going to need you to break that one down for me.
No problem. So lived religion basically shifts our focus away from those rigid doctrines and looks at how people actually incorporate their faith into their daily lives, no matter what their formal religious affiliation might be. It recognizes that religion isn't just about what you believe, but about how you live.
So it's less about the rituals and the rules and more about how people's faith shows up in their everyday lives.
Exactly. It's a way of acknowledging that faith isn't static, it's fluid. It adapts and evolves along with the world around us.
Okay, that makes sense, especially considering all the changes and tensions we've been talking about.
Right. And speaking of tensions, there's no better example than the unique case of Cuba. You sent over that blog post that really digs into the complexities of religion and revolution in that country.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear more about that. It sounds like Fidel Castro had a pretty complicated relationship with religion.
You could say that. He seemed to respect religious sentiments, even going so far as to say that the original Christianity is a revolutionary religion.
But his personal views didn't always line up with how the Cuban Communist Party acted, did they?
Not exactly. While Castro saw potential in Christianity as a force for social change, the Communist Party maintained strict control over religious involvement for years. They even banned Christians from becoming party members.
It sounds like he was trying to balance his own beliefs with the need to maintain political control.
Exactly. And that balancing act highlights the complexities of religious freedom within a one-party state.
So before we get into Cuba, I want to know more about how this idea of lived religion is shaping things in other parts of Latin America. What are some of the ways that young people are expressing their faith outside those traditional religious structures?
That's a great question and something we can definitely explore further as we continue this deep dive.
Sounds good. I'm ready to keep unpacking all of this.
Me too. Let's do it.
So we've been talking about this lived religion, how it's changing things. You mentioned it's not just about rejecting the old ways, but about finding new ways to connect with faith.
Yeah, exactly. Making it relevant, to everyday life. And we're seeing a real shift toward practices that are more tangible, I guess, more personal.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? Give me some examples.
Well, one thing that really jumped out at me from the research was this rise of small faith groups, kind of informal gatherings, not your typical church service.
So not like Sunday school or anything.
Yeah. No, think more intimate, where young people can actually connect with each other, share their struggles, their experiences, explore their faith in a way that feels real, authentic.
So it's more about dialogue, less about dogma.
Exactly. It gives them a space to wrestle with the tough questions, connect their faith to their lives, what's going on in the world, find meaning and purpose in a way that speaks to them.
Makes sense, especially in a world that feels so crazy sometimes. People want something real, something that speaks to their heart.
Right. And that need for authenticity, it goes beyond these small groups. We're also seeing more interest in different kinds of worship, things that engage the senses, like music, art, even nature-based spirituality.
So not just sitting in a pew anymore.
Not necessarily. It's about finding ways to make faith come alive, to really experience it. And this is pushing those traditional institutions to adapt, figure out how to connect with young people.
Speaking of adapting, you mentioned earlier, it's almost like some religious groups are having to rebrand themselves.
Yeah, kind of. They're realizing that the old ways don't always work anymore. Can't just rely on tradition, authority. They have to speak the language of young people, understand what they care about.
So how are they doing that? What are they trying?
Well, one obvious one is technology. Churches are all over social media now, creating online platforms to share their message, connect with young people where they're at.
It's like they're meeting them in their world instead of expecting them to come to theirs.
Right, exactly. And it's more than just using the latest gadgets, too. It's about understanding how young people communicate, what they're into, what they value, being relatable.
And are these traditional institutions getting it? This need to be relevant.
I think they're starting to. They're seeing that if they want to stay relevant, they have to engage with the issues that matter to young people, like social justice, climate change, mental health.
So it's not just about getting them in the door. It's about showing that faith can actually make a difference in the real world.
Yeah, connecting it to their lives, showing them that faith can be a source of strength, of guidance.
And this is where that lived religion comes in, making faith a part of everyday life, not just something you do on Sunday.
Absolutely. Connecting belief with action, faith with social engagement.
And this is challenging that old religious versus secular divide, right? We're seeing more and more people who don't necessarily identify with a specific religion, but they still consider themselves spiritual.
Totally. A lot of young people identify as spiritual but not religious now. They might find traditional institutions too rigid, too dogmatic, but they're still searching for meaning, connection.
So they're rejecting the label, but not the essence of spirituality.
Yeah, I think so. They're creating their own paths, drawing inspiration from all over. Eastern philosophy, indigenous traditions, mindfulness practices, it's all kind of blended together.
Wow, that's so interesting. This openness to different traditions, especially in Latin America,
Yeah,
which has such a rich and complex religious history.
it really is. And speaking of complex histories, we should probably talk about Cuba, that blog post you sent about
Wow.
Fidel Castro and the revolution. It's a great example of how politics, beliefs, they all get mixed up in really interesting ways.
I'm ready. Let's dive into that Cuban case. See what it tells us about this whole youth and religion thing in Latin America.
Yeah, let's do it. It's a story full of contradictions, twists and turns. But ultimately, it shows how powerful faith can be, even when things are changing all around you.
All right, Cuba. This blog post you sent really dives into this whole religion and revolution thing. It sounds like Fidel Castro, of all people, had some interesting ideas about faith.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Castro actually expressed a lot of respect for religious feelings, early on at least. He even said, get this, the original Christianity is a revolutionary religion.
Wow. But didn't he also admire liberation theology?
He did, which is all about, social justice, empowering the poor. So yeah, there were some common threads there.
But then you've got the Cuban Communist Party, which wasn't exactly known for being pro-religion.
Right, and they had a much stricter stance. Even though Castro himself, he admired figures like Camilo Torres, the priest who joined the guerrillas in Colombia.
Yeah, I remember reading about him.
But the Cuban government, they still put a lot of restrictions on religious activities. For years, Christians couldn't even be members of the Communist Party.
So it sounds like there was a real disconnect there between Castro's personal views and what the party was actually doing.
Exactly. And it created this really unique situation in Cuba. Shows you how complicated things can get, even within one country. Religion and politics, I mean. It's never simple.
Definitely not. Seems like Castro was trying to walk this fine line, recognizing that religion was important to a lot of Cubans, but also wanting to maintain control, not let it threaten the communist ideology.
Yeah, a real balancing act. And you see that in other parts of Latin America, too. Leaders trying to figure out what role does religion play, especially when society is going through all these changes.
And it all ties back to this lived religion idea, right? Even with all the restrictions in Cuba, people still found ways to practice their faith.
Oh, absolutely. Lived religion, it's all about how faith is actually lived, not just what's written down in some doctrine or whatever. And in Cuba, you see it in all these interesting ways. Music, art, community gatherings. People found ways to express their faith even when they couldn't do it openly.
So no matter what, that need for something spiritual, it finds a way through.
It really does. And you see that resilience all over Latin America, even in places that are more secular. Shows you how deep that human desire runs for meaning, for connection, something bigger than ourselves. It always finds a way.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe this shift towards, a more personal, more experiential kind of spirituality. Maybe that's how we make sense of the world today. Everything's changing so fast. Institutions are being questioned. Technology is changing everything. Maybe this more fluid way of believing, it helps people feel grounded.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea. And the research backs it up, not just in Latin America either. This is global. Young people, they want a spirituality that speaks to them personally. They're not just going to accept what the older generations tell them. They want to figure it out for themselves.
So where does all this leave us? What's the future of faith? Is this just a phase? Or is it something bigger, a whole new way of understanding what it means to be religious or spiritual?
That's the big question, right? Tough to say for sure. But I think what we're seeing now, it points to some pretty big changes.
It feels like we're moving away from this world where religion is all about institutions, rules and doctrines, and more towards, something more personal, where it's about your own experience, finding your own meaning.
Yeah, maybe. And it's all happening right now, driven by this new generation.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. Thanks for walking me through all this. I feel like I have a much better grasp on this whole thing now. The change is happening in Latin America,
Glad to hear it. But remember, this is just the start. The real learning comes when you connect these ideas to your own life, your own experiences.
Definitely. Lots to think about. Thanks again.
Anytime. And keep those sources coming. Always more to learn.
That's for sure. All right, listeners, until next time, keep on diving deep.